In the depths of North America's vast wilderness, where ancient forests stretch beyond human sight and mountain peaks pierce the clouds, people have reported encounters with something that shouldn't exist, a massive, hairy, bipedal creature that walks like a man but stands 8 feet tall and vanishes into the shadows before anyone can prove it's real. For over a century, thousands of witnesses across North America have claimed to see, hear, or find evidence of a creature that science says cannot exist. Bigfoot, Sasquatch, the wild man of the woods whose legend has captured imaginations and sparked debates that continue to this day. But here's what will surprise you. The Bigfoot phenomenon is far more complex than simple misidentification or hoaxing. It represents a fascinating intersection of Native American tradition, human psychology, cultural mythology, and the enduring mystery of what might still be hidden in the last wild places on Earth. Welcome to History Unleashed, where we explore the stories, mysteries, and phenomena that challenge our understanding of the world. I'm your host, and today we're investigating one of North America's most enduring mysteries, Bigfoot, whose legend spans centuries of indigenous tradition and modern sightings, scientific investigation and cultural fascination, compelling evidence and elaborate hoaxes. If you're ready to explore the truth behind America's most famous cryptid, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because what we're about to discover will take you deep into the forests where legend and reality blur, where eyewitness accounts challenge scientific certainty, and where the search for proof continues despite decades of frustration and controversy. So prepare yourself for a journey into the wilderness, where the question isn't just whether Bigfoot exists, but why this legend has proven so persistent and powerful across generations and cultures. The story of Bigfoot did not begin with modern sightings or grainy photographs, but stretches back centuries into the oral traditions and spiritual beliefs of indigenous peoples across North America, who described encounters with massive, hair-covered beings that inhabited the deep forests and high mountains, long before European colonization brought new populations and different cultural interpretations to these ancient lands. These indigenous traditions provide crucial context for understanding how the modern Bigfoot phenomenon connects to much older cultural narratives about the relationship between humans and the natural world. The indigenous peoples of the Pacific Northwest, including the Salish, Lummi, Nootka, and dozens of other groups, maintained detailed traditions about supernatural or quasi-human beings that dwelt in the wilderness and occasionally interacted with human communities in ways that ranged from helpful to dangerous. These beings were known by various names in different indigenous languages: Sasquatch, derived from the Salish word Saskats, Tsemekwes, Bookwes, and many others, each with distinct characteristics and roles within the complex spiritual and natural geography that indigenous peoples understood and navigated. The Sasquatch of Salish tradition was not simply a large ape or unknown primate, but a liminal being that existed at the boundary between the natural and supernatural worlds, possessing both physical form and spiritual power, that made encounters with them significant events requiring proper ritual responses and spiritual preparation. The creature's role in indigenous cosmology reflected broader beliefs about the animate nature of the wilderness and the presence of powerful beings that demanded respect and appropriate behavior from humans who ventured into their territories. The behavioral characteristics attributed to these beings in indigenous tradition often emphasize their intelligence, strength, and ability to move between human and wilderness realms in ways that suggested they were more than simple animals. Stories described Sasquatch kidnapping people, teaching survival skills, punishing disrespectful behavior toward nature, and serving as guardians of sacred places that humans should not casually enter or exploit for material gain. The geographic distribution of indigenous traditions about wildmen, giants, and hair-covered forest beings extended far beyond the Pacific Northwest to include virtually every major forest region and mountain range across North America. The Iroquois spoke of the Gnosqua or stone giants, the Lakota described the Chiatanka or big elder brother, and numerous other indigenous groups maintained their own traditions about beings that shared physical descriptions and behavioral patterns with what would later be called Bigfoot. The spiritual significance attributed to these beings in indigenous tradition varied considerably among different cultural groups, with some viewing them as essentially neutral wildlife that should be respected and avoided, while others understood them as possessing specific spiritual roles related to teaching, punishment, or protection of natural resources and sacred sites. These varying interpretations reflected the diverse cultural and spiritual frameworks that different indigenous peoples had developed through centuries of experience in their particular regions. The transmission of indigenous Bigfoot traditions to European settlers and later mainstream American culture occurred gradually through cultural exchange, intermarriage, and the documentation efforts of ethnographers and folklorists who recorded indigenous oral traditions during the 19th and 20th centuries. However, this transmission process often distorted or simplified the original spiritual and cultural meanings, transforming complex beings with specific roles in indigenous cosmology into generic monsters or undiscovered animals that could be understood through European cultural frameworks. Here's something that reveals the depth of indigenous knowledge about the natural world from which country are you watching this? Because indigenous cultures worldwide have maintained traditions about cryptic beings that inhabit wild places, often carrying important cultural and spiritual meanings that go beyond simple belief in monsters. What similar legends exist in your cultural traditions about beings that dwell in forests, mountains, or other wild places? Share your insights in the comments. The impact of European colonization on indigenous Bigfoot traditions was complex and multifaceted, as missionary activity, forced assimilation policies, and cultural suppression attempted to eliminate indigenous spiritual beliefs, while simultaneously creating conditions that would eventually lead to renewed interest in and documentation of these traditions. The loss of fluent speakers of indigenous languages and the disruption of traditional knowledge transmission systems meant that much detailed information about Bigfoot-related traditions was lost or significantly altered before it could be properly documented. The role of indigenous guides, trackers, and informants in early Euro-American encounters with Bigfoot-related phenomena provided crucial information that shaped how settlers and explorers interpreted unexplained signs, sounds, and occasional sightings in the wilderness. Indigenous peoples' willingness or reluctance to travel through particular areas, their warnings about dangerous beings in specific locations, and their interpretations of footprints and other physical evidence influenced how Euro-Americans understood and responded to their own potential encounters with unknown creatures. The commercialization and appropriation of indigenous Bigfoot traditions by mainstream American culture has created ongoing tensions and concerns within indigenous communities, as sacred stories and spiritual beings have been transformed into entertainment, tourism attractions, and subjects for scientific investigation that often ignore or minimize their cultural significance and spiritual meanings. Some indigenous leaders and cultural authorities have objected to the way their traditional knowledge has been exploited while they were excluded from discussions about its meaning and significance. The preservation of authentic indigenous Bigfoot traditions has become increasingly important as interest in cryptozoology and cultural heritage has grown, with efforts by indigenous communities, academic researchers, and cultural organizations to document and protect these traditions, while also asserting indigenous rights to control how their cultural knowledge is shared and interpreted. These preservation efforts recognize both the historical importance of these traditions and their continuing relevance to contemporary indigenous cultural identity and spiritual practice. The intersection of indigenous Bigfoot traditions with modern scientific investigation has created interesting dialogues and tensions, as some researchers have sought to incorporate indigenous knowledge into cryptozoological research, while others have dismissed these traditions as mere folklore irrelevant to scientific investigation. The question of whether indigenous traditions preserve accurate information about real but undiscovered creatures or represent spiritual and cultural constructs continues to generate debate among researchers, indigenous leaders, and interested observers. The transformation of Bigfoot from indigenous tradition to modern American phenomenon occurred gradually through the 19th and early 20th centuries as European settlers, miners, loggers, and other frontier workers began reporting their own encounters with mysterious large, hair-covered beings in remote wilderness areas across North America. These early modern encounters established the basic patterns of Bigfoot sightings that would characterize reports for the next century and a half, while also beginning the process by which indigenous traditions would be reinterpreted through Western scientific and cultural frameworks. The California Gold Rush era of the 1850s produced some of the earliest documented Euro-American encounters with what would later be called Bigfoot, as miners and prospectors working in remote mountain areas reported seeing massive hairy creatures and finding enormous footprints that could not be attributed to known animals. These reports, while often sensationalized in frontier newspapers, established California's northern regions as important locations for Bigfoot activity and created early public awareness of the phenomenon among non-indigenous populations. The logging industry's expansion into the dense forests of the Pacific Northwest during the late 19th and early 20th centuries brought thousands of workers into previously unexplored wilderness areas, creating conditions for increased encounters with whatever might be living in these remote forests. Loggers' reports of seeing large bipedal creatures, hearing strange vocalizations at night, and finding mysterious footprints around their camps became part of logging camp folklore and contributed to the growing body of Bigfoot-related accounts. The famous Jacko incident of 1884, in which a British Columbia newspaper reported the capture of a small hair-covered humanoid near Yale, British Columbia, represented one of the earliest cases that received significant media attention and public interest. While the ultimate fate of the supposed creature and the authenticity of the report remain unclear, the incident established patterns of media coverage and public fascination that would characterize Bigfoot reporting. For the next century, the Theodore Roosevelt account included in his 1892 book, The Wilderness Hunter, described a story told to him by a hunter who claimed his companion had been killed by a large, foul-smelling creature in Idaho's Bitterroot Mountains. Roosevelt's willingness to include this account in his book lent credibility to Bigfoot stories and demonstrated that even educated, sophisticated observers took such reports seriously enough to preserve them in published form. The Albert Ostman case of 1924, in which a Canadian prospector claimed to have been kidnapped by a family of Sasquatch and held captive for several days before escaping, became one of the most famous and controversial early modern Bigfoot accounts. Ostman's detailed description of the creature's appearance, behavior, and family structure provided information that would influence subsequent Bigfoot research, though skeptics have questioned whether the account represents genuine experience or elaborate fabrication. The Ape Canyon incident of 1924, in which a group of miners near Mount St. Helens, Washington, reported being attacked by rock-throwing ape-like creatures, generated significant media attention and created one of the first major public controversies about Bigfoot existence. The miners' detailed accounts, the physical evidence of rock impacts on their cabin, and the investigation by local authorities made this case particularly influential in establishing Bigfoot as a subject of serious public discussion, rather than just folklore. Here's something that shows how frontier conditions create opportunities for mysterious encounters. From which country are you watching this? Because frontier regions worldwide have generated reports of strange creatures and unexplained phenomena, often during periods when large areas were being newly explored by outside populations. What mysterious creature reports or frontier legends does your region have from periods of exploration or settlement? Share your thoughts in the comments. The role of newspapers and popular media in spreading Bigfoot stories during the early 20th century was crucial to transforming local reports into a broader cultural phenomenon. As sensationalistic coverage of encounters attracted readers while also encouraging additional people to report their own experiences or actively search for evidence of the creatures. The commercial incentives created by public interest in Bigfoot stories would continue to complicate efforts to separate genuine reports from hoaxes and exaggerations. The development of photography and later film technology created new possibilities for documenting Bigfoot encounters, though it also created new opportunities for hoaxing and the manipulation of evidence. The expectation that genuine encounters should produce photographic evidence placed increasing pressure on witnesses to document their experiences, while also making the absence of clear, photographic proof a significant argument for skeptics who questioned whether Bigfoot existed. The impact of increased human activity in wilderness areas during the early 20th century created more opportunities for encounters while also potentially affecting Bigfoot behavior and habitat use if such creatures actually existed. The construction of roads, the expansion of logging and mining operations, and the growth of outdoor recreation brought more people into remote areas, while also fragmenting and reducing the extent of truly isolated wilderness that might provide refuge for undiscovered large animals. The pattern of seasonal variation in Bigfoot reports, with increased activity during warmer months when more people ventured into wilderness areas, raise questions about whether the patterns reflected genuine creature behavior or simply the distribution of human activity and observation opportunities. This seasonal pattern would continue to characterize Bigfoot reports throughout the 20th century and into the present. The geographic clustering of early modern Bigfoot reports in particular regions, especially the Pacific Northwest, Northern California, and the mountainous areas of the western United States and Canada, suggested either that these areas provided particularly suitable habitat for undiscovered creatures, or that regional cultural factors made Bigfoot reports more likely to be generated and publicized in these locations. The concentration of reports in specific areas would become an important element in subsequent scientific and cryptozoological investigations. The evolution of Bigfoot. Descriptions over time revealed both consistencies and variations that would prove important for evaluating the phenomenon's reality. Core characteristics like large size, bipedal locomotion, and heavy body hair remained constant across most reports, while details about facial features, body proportions, and behavior showed considerable variation that either reflected the diversity of a real population or the influence of individual witnesses' expectations and cultural backgrounds. The year 1967 marked a crucial turning point in Bigfoot history when Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin allegedly filmed a large, hair-covered bipedal creature walking through a creek bed in Northern California's Bluff Creek area, creating what would become the most famous and controversial piece of evidence in cryptozoology. The Patterson-Gimlin film, as it became known, would inspire decades of analysis, debate, and attempted recreation, while fundamentally shaping public perceptions of what Bigfoot might look like and how such creatures might behave if they actually existed. Roger Patterson's background as a Bigfoot enthusiast who had previously published a book about the creature and had been actively searching for evidence created immediate questions about his credibility and potential motivations for producing hoaxed footage. Critics argued that Patterson's prior interest in Bigfoot and his financial investment in finding evidence made him particularly likely to either deliberately create fraudulent evidence or be fooled by a hoax perpetrated by others who knew about his search efforts. The circumstances of the October 20, 1967, filming involved Patterson and Gimlin riding on horseback through an area where large footprints had been previously found, allegedly encountering the creature unexpectedly when it emerged from behind logs near the creek. The sudden nature of the encounter and Patterson's decision to immediately pursue the creature while filming created footage that showed the subject from multiple angles as it walked away from the camera and briefly looked back before disappearing into the forest. The film itself captured approximately 59 seconds of footage, showing a large, dark-haired figure walking in a distinctive swaying gait that has become iconic in Bigfoot imagery. The subject appeared to display pronounced breasts, suggesting it was female, a detail that added biological plausibility, but also raised questions about how Patterson could have been so fortunate as to encounter and film what would have to be an extremely rare creature during one of his first serious search expeditions. The initial analysis of the Patterson-Gimlin film by various experts produced mixed conclusions, with some anthropologists and primatologists finding the subject's anatomy and locomotion consistent with a genuine large primate, while others identified features they claimed could only result from a person in a costume. The debate over the film's authenticity quickly became highly technical, involving detailed discussions of biomechanics, anatomy, and film analysis that continue to this day without reaching definitive consensus. The attempts to reproduce the Patterson-Gimlin film using people in costumes have produced results that supporters of the film's authenticity argue look obviously different from the original, while skeptics maintain that properly designed costumes could duplicate the appearance of the filmed subject. The controversy over whether costume technology available in 1967 could have produced the observed appearance has become central to debates about the film's authenticity, with both sides claiming that technical analysis supports their position. The role of special effects expert John Chambers in the Patterson-Gimlin controversy has been both invoked by skeptics, who claim he might have created a costume for Patterson, and disputed by those who point out that no definitive evidence links Chambers to the film. Various claims over the years that the film shows a person in a suit have never been substantiated with the actual costume or definitive proof of hoaxing, leaving the controversy unresolved. Here's something that shows how a single piece of evidence can dominate a field for decades. From which country are you watching this? Because many mysteries and unexplained phenomena have one famous piece of evidence that becomes the focus of endless debate and analysis. What examples can you think of from your region where a single photograph, film, or artifact has become central to debates about historical or scientific questions? Share your observations in the comments. The impact of the Patterson-Gimlin film on Bigfoot research and popular culture was enormous, as the footage provided a specific visual reference that influenced subsequent witness descriptions and created public expectations about what Bigfoot should look like. The film also attracted increased scientific attention to the Bigfoot question, while simultaneously creating skepticism among scientists who found the convenient timing and circumstances of the filming suspicious. The scientific analysis techniques applied to the Patterson-Gimlin film have evolved significantly over the decades, with modern digital enhancement and motion analysis providing new ways to examine the footage and evaluate its authenticity. Studies of the subject's stride length, body proportions, muscle movement, and other features have been conducted by researchers from various disciplines, though these analyses have typically reinforced rather than resolved the existing divide between believers and skeptics. The psychological and social impacts of the Patterson-Gimlin film extended beyond questions about Bigfoot existence to influence how people thought about evidence, proof, and the relationship between visual documentation and scientific acceptance. The film demonstrated how even seemingly clear photographic evidence could be subject to radically different interpretations based on viewer assumptions, expertise, and prior beliefs about the subject matter. The commercial exploitation of the Patterson-Gimlin film through media appearances, documentaries, and merchandise created financial incentives that skeptics have argued compromise the credibility of claims about the film's authenticity. The fact that Patterson and later Gimlin profited from the footage has been cited as evidence that hoaxing could have been motivated by financial gain, though supporters note that this argument assumes guilt rather than proving it. The legacy of the Patterson-Gimlin film for cryptozoology has been mixed, as the footage both legitimized Bigfoot research by providing what appeared to be concrete evidence worthy of serious study, and also attracted ridicule from mainstream scientists, who viewed the film as obvious hoax or misidentification. The film's prominent role in cryptozoological discourse has made Bigfoot research more visible, while also making it harder to separate serious investigation from sensationalism and entertainment. The continuing debate over the Patterson-Gimlin film more than 50 years after its creation demonstrates both the enduring fascination with Bigfoot and the difficulty of resolving questions about cryptid existence using evidence that falls short of physical specimens or clearly unambiguous documentation. The film remains the closest thing to a photographic proof that the cryptozoological community possesses, while also serving as a cautionary tale about how controversial evidence can generate endless debate without producing resolution. The search for concrete evidence of Bigfoot's existence has generated an enormous collection of footprints, hair samples, vocalizations, photographs, videos, and other materials that proponents argue demonstrate the creature's reality, while skeptics dismiss as hoaxes, misidentifications, or natural phenomena misinterpreted through the lens of cryptozoological belief. The evaluation of this evidence requires careful consideration of both the potential for genuine discovery and the many ways that human error, wishful thinking, and deliberate deception can create false positives in cryptid research. Footprint evidence represents the most common type of physical sign attributed to Bigfoot, with thousands of tracks having been documented, photographed, and cast in plaster over the decades of research. These prints typically show characteristics consistent with a large bipedal creature, including substantial size, often 15-20 inches in length, apparent toe articulation, and depth suggesting significant weight, though the interpretation of these features and their implications for Bigfoot existence remains highly controversial among researchers and skeptics. The analysis of Bigfoot footprints by anthropologists, forensic specialists, and other experts has produced mixed results, with some finding anatomical features and biomechanical implications consistent with a genuine large primate, while others have identified characteristics they interpret as evidence of fabrication or natural formations misidentified as footprints. The technical debates over dermal ridges, mid-tarsal breaks, and other anatomical details have become increasingly specialized, creating challenges for non-expert observers trying to evaluate the evidence. The history of footprint hoaxing in Bigfoot research is well documented, with several prominent cases of deliberately created fake tracks that fooled researchers and media outlets before being exposed as fraudulent. The most famous hoaxer, Ray Wallace, was revealed after his death to have created numerous fake Bigfoot tracks over several decades, casting doubt on some historical footprint evidence that had been considered credible before the hoax was exposed. Hair and tissue samples attributed to Bigfoot have been subjected to DNA analysis, microscopic examination, and other scientific testing with results that have generally failed to support the existence of an unknown primate species. Most hair samples tested have been identified as coming from known animals like bears, horses, or deer, though a small number have produced ambiguous results that either reflect contamination, degraded samples, or potentially interesting anomalies that require further investigation. The vocal recordings attributed to Bigfoot, including the famous Sierra sounds recorded in the 1970s, have been analyzed by audio experts, linguists, and primatologists with varying conclusions about whether the sounds represent undiscovered primates, known animals, or human productions. The analysis of alleged Bigfoot vocalizations involves complex questions about acoustic properties, vocalization capabilities, and the challenges of identifying sound sources in wilderness environments, where multiple animals and natural phenomena can produce unusual noises. Here's something that shows the challenges of cryptozoological evidence. From which country are you watching this? Because the search for undiscovered large animals has occurred worldwide, often producing similar types of evidence that prove difficult to evaluate definitively. What cryptids or mysterious creatures are searched for in your region, and what types of evidence have been presented? Share your thoughts in the comments. The photographic and video evidence for Bigfoot beyond the Patterson-Gimlin film consists mainly of brief, unclear footage and distant or blurry photographs that provide insufficient detail for definitive identification. The pattern of consistently poor quality visual documentation has been noted by skeptics as evidence against Bigfoot existence, arguing that if the creatures were real, the proliferation of cameras and smartphones should have produced clearer images by now. The role of misidentification in generating false Bigfoot evidence has been demonstrated in numerous cases where alleged sightings or physical evidence were later shown to involve bears, known wildlife, humans, or natural phenomena mistaken for cryptids. The psychological factors that contribute to misidentification, including expectation, pattern recognition, and memory reconstruction, have been studied by researchers interested in understanding how sincere witnesses can report experiences that don't correspond to reality. The environmental evidence proposed by some Bigfoot researchers, including tree structures, nests, and other signs of purported creature activity, remains highly controversial, with critics arguing that these formations can be explained through natural tree falls, bear behavior, and human construction misattributed to Bigfoot. The interpretation of such evidence requires extensive knowledge of wildlife behavior and forest ecology that can help distinguish genuine anomalies from normal natural processes. The application of modern technology to Bigfoot research, including trail cameras, drones, environmental DNA sampling, and sophisticated audio recording equipment, has expanded the search for evidence while also raising new questions about why such technology has not yet produced definitive proof of the creature's existence. The failure of thousands of trail cameras deployed in areas of reported Bigfoot activity to capture clear images of the creatures has become a significant argument used by skeptics. The quality control challenges in cryptozoological evidence collection have been acknowledged by serious researchers who recognize that the field lacks the standardized protocols, peer review processes, and institutional safeguards that help ensure reliability in mainstream scientific research. The mixture of professional scientists, amateur enthusiasts, and opportunistic hoaxers involved in Bigfoot research has created confusion about evidence quality and made it difficult to separate credible reports from unreliable claims. The psychological and cultural factors that influence evidence interpretation in Bigfoot research have been studied by social scientists interested in understanding how belief systems affect perception and reasoning about ambiguous phenomena. Research has shown that prior beliefs about Bigfoot existence strongly influence how people interpret evidence, with believers finding the same materials convincing that skeptics dismiss as clearly insufficient for supporting extraordinary claims. The scientific community's relationship with Bigfoot research has been characterized by widespread skepticism, occasional serious investigation, and ongoing debate about whether the phenomenon deserves scientific attention, given the lack of physical specimens and the prevalence of hoaxing and misidentification. The divide between mainstream science and cryptozoology reflects fundamental differences in evidentiary standards, research methodology, and assumptions about what types of claims require extraordinary proof before being accepted as potentially valid. The absence of physical specimens, despite over a century of reports and searches, represents the single most powerful argument used by scientific skeptics to dismiss Bigfoot as legend rather than undiscovered species. Scientists note that no bones, bodies, or definitive biological material from Bigfoot has ever been recovered and verified, despite the many opportunities for such discoveries that should exist if substantial populations of large primates inhabited North American forests. The ecological arguments against Bigfoot existence emphasize the biological requirements and population dynamics that would be necessary for a viable breeding population of large primates to exist in North America without being definitively documented. Biologists point out that large primates require substantial food resources, leave significant environmental impacts, and would need population sizes of at least several thousand individuals to avoid inbreeding and extinction, making their continued concealment implausible. Given modern surveillance and the extent of human activity in wilderness areas, the biogeographic challenges to Bigfoot existence include questions about how large primate populations could have reached North America, evolved in isolation, and adapted to climates very different from those that support other great apes. The fossil record shows no evidence of indigenous great apes in North America, and the proposed migration routes from Asia either would have left paleontological evidence or would require scenarios that seem implausible given what is known about past climate conditions and animal migrations, and the methodological criticisms of cryptozoological research by mainstream scientists focus on the lack of rigorous protocols, the failure to publish in peer-reviewed journals, and the tendency to rely on anecdotal evidence rather than systematic studies designed to test specific hypotheses about Bigfoot existence. Scientists argue that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence collected through methods that meet the standards applied to other zoological research, standards that Bigfoot research has generally failed to meet. The few mainstream scientists who have taken Bigfoot reports seriously and conducted formal research into the phenomenon, including the late anthropologist Grover Krantz, have faced significant professional risks and criticism from colleagues who view such work as career suicide. The social costs of being associated with cryptozoological research have deterred many scientists from examining Bigfoot evidence, even when they might find some aspects of the phenomenon worthy of investigation. The role of confirmation bias in both cryptozoological research and scientific skepticism has been acknowledged by researchers who recognize that both believers and skeptics tend to interpret ambiguous evidence in ways that support their existing conclusions. The polarized nature of the Bigfoot debate has made it difficult to conduct dispassionate analysis that could potentially bridge the gap between those convinced of the creature's existence and those certain it does not exist. Here's something that shows how scientific consensus forms and resists unconventional ideas. From which country are you watching this? Because every region has examples of scientific ideas that were initially rejected before being accepted, or claims that remain outside mainstream science despite passionate advocacy. What examples can you think of from your region where the relationship between mainstream science and alternative theories has been controversial? Share your insights in the comments. The psychology of extraordinary claims and burden of proof has been extensively studied by researchers interested in understanding how people evaluate evidence for phenomena that challenge scientific consensus. Studies have shown that believers in cryptids like Bigfoot often apply different standards of evidence than skeptics, with believers accepting circumstantial evidence and eyewitness testimony that skeptics consider insufficient for supporting claims about unknown species. The role of media and popular culture in shaping both public perceptions of Bigfoot and the evidence that gets reported has created feedback loops that can amplify belief while also generating increased skepticism from those who view the phenomenon as primarily entertainment-driven, rather than grounded in genuine biological mystery. The commercial success of Bigfoot-themed television shows, documentaries, and merchandise has created financial incentives that critics argue compromise the objectivity of research and reporting. The statistical analysis of Bigfoot sighting patterns has revealed correlations with human population density, media coverage, and cultural factors that suggest social and psychological explanations may account for significant portions of the phenomenon rather than encounters with actual creatures. The clustering of sightings near roads and human settlements rather than in the most remote wilderness areas has been interpreted by skeptics as evidence that reports reflect human activity rather than creature distribution. The comparison of Bigfoot research to other cryptozoological pursuits and to historical scientific discoveries reveals both potential parallels and significant differences. While some cryptids like the mountain gorilla and coelacanth turned out to be real despite initial scientific skepticism, these species were eventually documented through physical specimens, and their existence was confirmed through processes that met scientific standards. The failure of Bigfoot research to produce similar conclusive evidence after decades of searching has strengthened skeptical arguments. The philosophical questions raised by the Bigfoot phenomenon extend beyond simple questions about species existence to encompass broader issues about the nature of evidence, the relationship between scientific authority and popular belief, and the psychological needs that may be served by belief in undiscovered creatures that inhabit wild places beyond human control and understanding. The transformation of Bigfoot from cryptozoological mystery to cultural icon demonstrates how legends can take on lives of their own independent of questions about their factual basis, becoming embedded in regional identity, commercial enterprise, and popular culture in ways that ensure their continuation regardless of scientific evidence or skeptical debunking. The cultural significance of Bigfoot extends far beyond questions about species existence to encompass deeper meanings about wilderness, mystery, and humanity's relationship with the natural world. The regional identity associations with Bigfoot have become particularly strong in the Pacific Northwest, where the creature has been embraced as a symbol of the region's distinctive character, natural beauty, and connection to wilderness that sets it apart from more urbanized areas. Towns throughout the region have adopted Bigfoot imagery for tourism promotion, local businesses and community celebrations that make the creature a permanent part of local culture regardless of whether it actually exists. The tourism industry built around Bigfoot has generated significant economic benefits for regions that promote themselves as prime Bigfoot territory, with businesses offering guided expeditions, museums, festivals, and merchandise that capitalize on public fascination with the creature. The economic incentives created by Bigfoot tourism have given communities strong motivation to perpetuate the mystery rather than resolve it, as definitive proof of non-existence would eliminate a valuable commercial asset. The role of Bigfoot in popular culture extends from serious documentaries and research programs to comedy films, advertising campaigns, and internet memes that treat the creature as familiar figure, whose image and legend can be used for various purposes without detailed explanation. This cultural ubiquity has made Bigfoot one of the most recognizable cryptids worldwide, while also contributing to debates about whether the phenomenon should be taken seriously or viewed primarily as entertainment. The evolution of Bigfoot depictions in media and popular culture reveals changing cultural attitudes toward nature, science, and the possibility of undiscovered species. Early portrayals emphasize the creature's potential danger and primitive nature, while more recent depictions have often presented Bigfoot as an intelligent, even sympathetic figure whose elusiveness represents admirable adaptation rather than primitive simplicity. The literary and artistic engagement with Bigfoot themes has produced works that use the creature metaphorically to explore human concerns about environmental destruction, loss of wilderness, and the psychological appeal of mysteries that remain unsolved. These artistic interpretations often deliberately sidestep questions about literal existence to focus on the meanings and emotions that Bigfoot legends evoke, regardless of their factual basis. The role of social media and internet culture in contemporary Bigfoot discourse has created new platforms for sharing sighting reports, analyzing evidence, and debating the creature's existence, while also making hoaxing easier and making it more difficult to verify the authenticity of reported encounters. The viral spread of Bigfoot-related content through social media has exposed the legend to global audiences, while also increasing skepticism among younger generations. Familiar with digital manipulation and internet hoaxing, here's something that shows how mysteries can become more culturally significant than their literal truth. From which country are you watching this? Because many regions have embraced mysterious creatures or legends as cultural symbols regardless of whether they're factually true, recognizing their value for tourism, identity, and storytelling. What examples can you think of from your culture where legends have become important symbols even if their literal truth is questionable? Share your thoughts in the comments. The psychological functions served by belief in Bigfoot have been studied by researchers interested in understanding why cryptid legends persist despite lack of scientific validation. Studies suggest that Bigfoot belief may provide satisfying narratives about wilderness mystery, allow people to maintain hope that unknown wonders still exist, and serve as proxy for environmental concerns about habitat destruction and species extinction. The generational transmission of Bigfoot traditions demonstrates how legends adapt to changing cultural conditions while maintaining core elements that ensure continuity across time. Older forms of Bigfoot belief rooted in indigenous tradition or early settler encounters have been transformed into modern narratives incorporating scientific language, technological investigation, and contemporary cultural concerns while maintaining the basic premise of unknown creatures in wilderness areas. The relationship between Bigfoot belief and broader attitudes towards science, authority, and conventional knowledge has been examined by sociologists who see cryptid enthusiasm as part of larger cultural patterns involving skepticism toward expert consensus and attraction to alternative ways of knowing. The resistance to scientific dismissal of Bigfoot claims reflects broader cultural tensions about who gets to define reality and whose experiences and knowledge count as legitimate evidence. The commercial exploitation of Bigfoot through various media has created complex economic ecosystems involving researchers, television producers, tour operators, and merchandise sellers whose livelihoods depend on maintaining public interest in the phenomenon. This commercialization has been criticized for prioritizing entertainment and profit over serious investigation, while also being defended as necessary for supporting continued research and keeping the mystery alive in public consciousness. The environmental symbolism embodied by Bigfoot has made the creature a powerful icon for wilderness protection and conservation messaging, as the notion of an undiscovered species requiring vast undisturbed habitat resonates with arguments about the importance of preserving large wild areas. Environmental organizations have occasionally used Bigfoot imagery in their campaigns, recognizing the creature's cultural power regardless of its biological reality. The persistence of the Bigfoot phenomenon into the 21st century, despite decades of scientific skepticism and the failure to produce definitive proof of the creature's existence, demonstrates the enduring human fascination with mysteries that resist resolution and the complex psychological, cultural, and social factors that sustain legendary narratives regardless of evidentiary challenges. The continued reporting of sightings, ongoing research efforts, and sustained public interest ensure that Bigfoot will remain a part of North American culture and consciousness for the foreseeable future, even if the question of the creature's existence is never definitively resolved. The modern technology available for cryptozoological research has expanded dramatically to include drone surveillance, environmental DNA sampling, automated trail camera systems, and sophisticated data analysis tools that should theoretically make discovering large unknown animals easier than ever before. Yet this technological advancement has not produced the definitive evidence that would resolve the Bigfoot question, leading to different interpretations about whether this failure demonstrates non-existence or simply reflects the challenges of documenting extremely rare and elusive creatures. The environmental DNA techniques that have revolutionized wildlife biology by allowing detection of species from water, soil, or air samples have been applied to Bigfoot research, with results that have so far failed to support the existence of unknown primate species in North America. The absence of Bigfoot DNA in samples collected from areas of reported activity has been interpreted by skeptics as strong evidence against existence, while some researchers argue that sampling methods may be inadequate for detecting very rare and mobile animals. The citizen science dimension of modern Bigfoot research has engaged thousands of amateur investigators who contribute sighting reports, conduct field research, and analyze evidence using online platforms and social media networks that facilitate collaboration and information sharing. This democratization of cryptozoological research has both expanded the investigation capacity and created quality control challenges as unverified claims and dubious evidence spread rapidly through these networks. The academic study of Bigfoot as cultural phenomenon rather than biological reality has grown significantly as anthropologists, folklorists, and sociologists recognize the legend's importance for understanding American culture, identity formation, and the relationship between scientific authority and popular belief. This scholarly attention has legitimized Bigfoot as a subject worthy of serious study, while also generally accepting that the creature probably doesn't exist as a biological entity. The indigenous perspectives on contemporary Bigfoot discourse have become increasingly important as Native American communities assert their authority over traditional knowledge and challenge how their cultural traditions have been appropriated and commercialized by mainstream Bigfoot research and entertainment. Some indigenous leaders have called for greater respect for the spiritual and cultural significance of Sasquatch traditions rather than treating them simply as cryptozoological data. The future of Bigfoot research faces several possible trajectories, ranging from continued indefinite mystery to eventual definitive resolution through either proof of existence or conclusive demonstration of non-existence. The path that the phenomenon follows will depend on factors including technological development, funding availability for systematic research, and cultural changes that might increase or decrease public interest in cryptozoological mysteries. The philosophical questions raised by the Bigfoot phenomenon extend beyond simple species existence to encompass fundamental issues about the nature of evidence, the limits of scientific knowledge, and the value of maintaining mystery and wonder in an increasingly documented and explained world. Some defenders of Bigfoot research argue that the search itself has value regardless of outcome, as it encourages wilderness exploration, critical thinking about evidence, and engagement with questions about the unknown. Here's something that captures the enduring nature of certain mysteries. From which country are you watching this? Because the persistence of unsolved mysteries despite modern technology and investigation is a global phenomenon that tells us something about human psychology and the limits of our knowledge. What long-standing mysteries from your region continue to resist resolution despite ongoing investigation? Share your thoughts in the comments. The legacy of Bigfoot for American culture will likely persist regardless of whether the creature's existence is ever proven or definitively disproven, as the legend has become too deeply embedded in regional identity, popular culture, and national mythology to simply disappear. Bigfoot serves functions that transcend questions about biological reality, providing symbolic representation of wilderness mystery and the possibility that despite our technological sophistication, there might still be important things we don't know. The lessons that the Bigfoot phenomenon offers about human nature, belief formation, and the relationship between evidence and conviction remain valuable regardless of the creature's reality. The study of why people believe or disbelieve in Bigfoot, how evidence is interpreted differently by different observers, and what psychological and cultural needs are served by cryptid legends provides insights into broader questions about how humans understand their world and construct meaningful narratives about their place in nature. The intersection of Bigfoot research with broader concerns about biodiversity, habitat preservation, and species extinction gives the phenomenon contemporary relevance beyond entertainment or scientific curiosity. Whether or not Bigfoot exists, the vast wilderness areas that would be required to support undiscovered large primates are valuable ecosystems that deserve protection for the known species they contain and the ecological services they provide. The technological future of Bigfoot investigation may eventually provide conclusive answers through methods like comprehensive environmental DNA surveys, satellite monitoring of remote wilderness areas, or artificial intelligence analysis of vast databases of sighting reports and evidence. Alternatively, the continued failure to produce definitive proof despite increasingly sophisticated investigation may eventually convince even believers That the creature does not exist as a biological entity. The human need for mystery and wonder that Bigfoot satisfies will likely continue regardless of whether this particular cryptid is proven real or remains legendary, as new mysteries emerge to capture imagination and provide the sense that despite human knowledge and technological power, the world still contains undiscovered wonders waiting to be found. The Bigfoot phenomenon demonstrates that humans need stories about what might exist beyond the edges of known reality, whether those stories reflect biological truth or serve primarily psychological and cultural functions. As we emerge from the forests and mountains where Bigfoot legends dwell, we're left with a mystery that reveals as much about human nature as it does about the possibility of undiscovered species lurking in North America's remaining wilderness. The search for Bigfoot has taken us through centuries of indigenous tradition, decades of modern investigation, and countless encounters that people claim change their understanding of what's possible in the natural world. We've discovered that the Bigfoot phenomenon is far more complex than simple belief in a monster or straightforward, scientific question about species existence. It represents the intersection of cultural tradition and modern cryptozoology, personal experience and scientific skepticism, commercial exploitation and genuine research, all centered on a creature that has managed to remain tantalizingly beyond definitive proof for over a century of active searching. Whether Bigfoot exists as a biological reality or functions primarily as cultural legend, the phenomenon continues to serve important purposes: preserving indigenous traditions, promoting wilderness conservation, providing economic benefits to rural communities, and maintaining a sense of mystery and possibility in an increasingly mapped and explained world. The creature's greatest power may lie not in its physical existence, but in its ability to represent something important about humanity's relationship with nature and the unknown. Perhaps the most profound lesson of the Bigfoot phenomenon is that certainty isn't always necessary for something to be meaningful or valuable. The ongoing search for proof, the debates about evidence, and the stories people tell about their encounters all contribute to a rich cultural tradition that would lose something important if it were definitively resolved in either direction. If you've enjoyed this exploration of America's most famous cryptid mystery, make sure you're subscribed to History Unleashed and hit that notification bell, because we're committed to investigating the phenomena, legends, and mysteries that challenge our understanding and capture human imagination across cultures and generations. What do you think about the Bigfoot phenomenon? Is there an undiscovered primate species hiding in North American forests? Or does the legend persist for other reasons? Have you had experiences in the wilderness that made you wonder about what might be out there beyond our certain knowledge? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below, and let me know what other mysteries you'd like us to investigate. Remember, whether Bigfoot is real or legendary, the wild places where the creature supposedly dwells are real and valuable, deserving protection not because they might harbor cryptids, but because wilderness itself is precious and increasingly rare in our modern world. The search for Bigfoot, whatever its ultimate outcome, reminds us that there are still places beyond human control where mystery, wonder, and the unknown can flourish. This is History Unleashed, where every mystery teaches us something about ourselves, and where the search for truth matters as much as the truth itself.